Iceland's defences consist of the Icelandic Coast Guard, which patrols Icelandic waters and airspace, and other services such as the National Commissioner's National Security and Special Forces units. Iceland is, however, the only NATO member which maintains no standing army, although there is no legal impediment to forming one, and Icelandic services perform the operations fellow NATO allies relegate to their standing armies. The Coast Guard consists of 3 ships and 4 aircraft and armed with small arms, naval artillery, and air defense weaponry. The Coast Guard also maintains the Iceland Air Defense System, formerly part of the disestablished Defense Agency, which conducts ground surveillance of Iceland's airspace. Units subordinated to the National Commissioner also take part in Iceland's defences. Foremost of these are the National Security Unit, which handles intelligence operations, and the Special Unit Vikingasveitin, a highly trained and equipped counter-terrorism unit which is a part of the National Police Force. Additionally, there is a Crisis Response Unit, operated by the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, which is a small peacekeeping force that has been deployed internationally since 2008. This unit also has an unarmed component. Furthermore, there is a treaty with the United States regarding the defense of Iceland. The former maintained a military base known as Naval Air Station Kjallakr, before it was disestablished in 2006. There are also agreements about military and other security operations with Norway, Denmark and other NATO countries. Iceland holds the annual Nato Exercises entitled Northern Viking. The most recent exercises were held in 2011, as well as the OD exercise, Northern Challenge. In 1997, Iceland hosted its first Partnership for Peace exercise, Cooperative Safeguard, which is the only multilateral PFP exercise so far in which Russia has participated. Another major PFP exercise was hosted in 2000. Iceland has also contributed ICRU peacekeepers to SFOR, KFOR and ISAF. The government of Iceland contributes financially to NATO's international overhead costs and recently has taken a more active role in NATO deliberations and planning. Iceland hosted the NATO Foreign Ministers meeting in Reykjavik in June 1987. Additionally, Norway has agreed to grant Icelandic citizens the same eligibility as Norwegian citizens for military education in Norway, and to serve as professional soldiers in the Norwegian Defence Forces. History. In the period from the settlement of Iceland, in the 870s, until it became part of the realm of the Norwegian king, military defences of Iceland consisted of multiple chieftains and the free followers organized according to the standard Nordic military doctrine of the time in expeditionary armies such as the Lethang. These armies were divided into units according to the quality of the warriors and by birth. At the end of this period, the number of chieftains had diminished and the power had grown, to the detriment of their followers. This resulted in a long and bloody civil war known as Age of the Sturlungs. A typical battle involved fewer than 1,000 men. Amphibious operations were an important part of warfare in Iceland in this period, especially in the West Fjords. But large naval engagements were rare. The largest such engagement, known as Flóabardagi, involved a few dozen ships in Hunaflói. In the decades before the Napoleonic Wars, the few hundred militiamen in the southwest of Iceland were mainly equipped with rusty and mostly obsolete medieval weaponry, including 16th-century halberds. When English raiders arrived in 1808, after sinking or capturing most of the Danish-Norwegian navy in the Battle of Copenhagen, the amount of gunpowder in Iceland was so small that the governor of Iceland, Count Tramp, could not offer any resistance. In 1855, the Icelandic army was re-established by Andreas August von Kuhl, the sheriff in Vestmannaeyjar. In 1856, the king provided 180 riksdaler to buy guns, and a further 200 riksdaler the following year. The sheriff became the captain of the new army, which became known as Herfylking the battalion. In 1860 von Kohl died, and Per Kjallakr Bjarnason took over command. 9 years later Bjarnason died without appointing a successor, and the army fell into disarray. In 1918 Iceland regained sovereignty as a separate kingdom under the Danish king. Iceland established a coast guard shortly afterwards, but it was financially impossible to establish a standing army. The government hoped that a permanent neutrality would shield the country from invasion. But at the onset of Second World War, the government was concerned about a possible invasion. Ing decided to expand the Icelandic National Police and its reserves into a military unit. Chief Commissioner of Police Agnar Kofod Hansen had been trained in the Danish army, and he moved to train his officers. Weapons and uniforms were acquired, and they practiced rifle shooting and military tactics near Laugarvarth. Hansen barely managed to train his 60 officers before the United Kingdom's invasion of Iceland on 10 May 1940. The next planned step towards strengthening the army was to train the 300-strong reserve forces, but this was prevented by the invasion. During the Second World War, the United States took over defense of Iceland from the British, and this arrangement continued well after the war, eventually codified in the agreed minute. Expansion was therefore concentrated primarily in the Icelandic Coast Guard, which saw action in a series of confrontations with British fishing vessels and warships known as the Cod Wars. After withdrawal of U.S. forces in 2006, Iceland reorganized some military functions in the form of the Icelandic Defense Agency, founded in 2008, under the Minister for Foreign Affairs. The agency took over operations at Naval Air Station Keflavik, but was closed in 2011 in the wake of the economic crisis, with functions distributed to the existing organizations. Coast Guard. Shortly after Iceland reclaimed its sovereignty in 1918, the Icelandic Coast Guard was founded. Its first vessel, a former Danish research vessel, was armed with a 57mm cannon. The Coast Guard is responsible for protecting Iceland's sovereignty and vital interests, including the most valuable natural resource, its fishing areas, as well as providing security, search, and rescue services to Iceland's fishing fleet. In 1952, 1958, 1972, and 1975, the government progressively expanded Iceland's exclusive economic zone to 4, 12, 50 and then 200 nautical miles. This led to a conflict with the United Kingdom, among other states, known as the Cod Wars. The Icelandic Coast Guard and the Royal Navy confronted each other on several occasions during these years. Although few rounds were fired, there were many intense moments. Today the Coast Guard remains Iceland's premier fighting force, equipped with armed patrol vessels and aircraft and partaking in peacekeeping operations in foreign lands. The Coast Guard has 4 vessels and 4 aircraft at their disposal. Iceland Air Defence System. The Iceland Air Defence System, or Íslenska Loftvarnakerfið, was founded in 1987, and operates 4 radar complexes, a software and support facility and a command and report center. It is a part of the Coast Guard. Iceland's NATO allies also regularly deploy fighter aircraft to patrol the country's airspace as part of the Icelandic Air Policing Mission. Icelandic Crisis Response Unit. The Icelandic Crisis Response Unit is an expeditionary peacekeeping force maintained by the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. It is manned by personnel from Iceland's other services, armed or not, including the National Police, Coast Guard, emergency services and healthcare system. Because of the military nature of most of the ICRU's assignments, all of its members receive basic infantry combat training. This training has often been conducted by the Norwegian Army, but the Coast Guard and the Special Forces are also assigned to train the ICRU. Most of the ICRU's camouflage and weaponry is procured from abroad, with some indigenous development. Some arms and uniforms are also borrowed from the Norwegian Defence Forces. The formation and employment of the unit has met controversy in Iceland, especially by people to the left on the political scale. In October 2004, 3 ICRU soldiers were wounded in a suicide bombing in Kabul. The incident led to tough questioning of the group's commander, Colonel Halli Sigurðsson, focusing on his conduct. Later the command was passed to Colonel Lars Atlason. In 2008, the portion of uniformed ICRU deployed personnel still armed for self-defense returned their weapons and changed to civilian clothing. The policy since 2008 is that, unless under special circumstances, ICRU personnel do not wear uniforms or carry weapons. ICRU missions. The ICRU has or is operating in military missions: Afghanistan within ISAF, Iraq within NTM1, Serbia, Kosovo within KFOR. Civilian missions: Bosnia and Herzegovina within EUPM, Lebanon within MACSL, Sri Lanka within SLMM. List of small arms used by Icelandic forces: Glock 17 pistol, Styr SSG-69 sniper rifle, Demakosi 8 assault rifle, Heckler & Koch G3, AG-3 battle rifle, Heckler & Koch MP5 submachine gun, Heckler & Koch G36 assault rifle, Blazer a 93-7.62 x 51 NATO sniper rifle, Rheinmetall MG3 medium machine gun, M14 rifle, Mossberg 500 shotgun, Browning M2 machine gun,